Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Welcome to webinar 2 out of 4 in the 2025 Community Science Long Island webinar series. My name is Sally Kellogg from the South Shore Estuary Reserve Office, and I will be facilitating today's Water Chestnut webinar. The goal of Community Science Long Island series is to highlight various community science opportunities around Long Island and how the data accumulated by the public influences local environmental management efforts. The Community Science webinar series is brought to you by the South Shore Estuary Reserve Office, CTUC, Long Island Sound Study, New York Sea Grant, and Peconic Estuary Partnership. And for the first time in CSLI, we have also partnered with Long Island Invasive Species Management Area, also known as LISMA. A couple housekeeping notes. The webinar today is being recorded and will be available on CTUC's website shortly after the webinar concludes. Your video and microphones are turned off, but you are free to ask questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you don't have a question but want to share a resource or discuss amongst the group, you're more than welcome to do so. Now, to get back into today's webinar topic, I want to say Happy Invasive Species Awareness Week. As I said before, tonight's webinar will cover water chestnut. Invasive species like water chestnut can wreak havoc on the delicate balance of our lakes, crowding out native species and disrupting the ecosystem. I want to also note that this month there are some volunteer opportunities to remove invasive water chestnut. So I will drop the registration link in the chat if you're interested in joining one of those. But we'll talk about this later in the webinar as well. So next, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. Our first speaker is Abby Marino. She is the program manager for the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area. She received her bachelor's degree in environmental science from Cornell University. In addition to her work at LISMA, she is currently pursuing a master's degree in energy and environmental management at the University of Connecticut. Our second speaker is Carlos Morantes Ariza. He's a fourth-year PhD student in the Theoretical Ecology Lab at Stony Brook University, where he studies population and community dynamics in ecological systems. He also serves as the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for the DEC on Long Island. His work focuses on bridging applied and theoretical ecology through tools like automation and microcontrollers to support conservation and management efforts. So, without further ado, I would like to invite our speakers to begin. Abby, if you would like to share your screen.
Sure, I'll get right on that. Thank you, Sally, for the introduction. All right, there we go. Yeah,
Perfect.
so welcome to Community Science Long Island, and also Happy New York Invasive Species Awareness Week. Tonight, we're talking about this aquatic invasive species that you can make a difference in helping by helping us manage it, remove it, and protect our freshwater ponds and lakes. And that species is water chestnut. So I'll be walking through the biology, like what is water chestnut, how do you identify it, aspects of its ecology, like what impacts does water chestnut have on the environment, economy, or human health, and also finish it off by talking about some strategy. What are some ways that it can be managed? And that'll lead right into what Carlos is organizing. But first, let me introduce myself and Lizma. I'm the program manager for the Long Island Invasive Species Management Area. And LISMA is a group of organizations working together to reduce the threat of invasive species and protect local ecosystems from New York City out to Long Island. So we span this whole area from Staten Island all the way out to the South Fork, the North Fork. That's a lot of space to cover, a lot of species to cover. And we work on protecting biodiversity, responding to emerging invasive species, and connecting professionals and the public on invasive species news and education, like we're doing right here. Our funding is provided by the New York Environmental Protection Fund as administered through the Department of Environmental Conservation. We're also hosted by the Long Island Native Plant Initiative. So we'll jump into the water chestnut biology. What is water chestnut and how do you identify it? So you might have heard of water chestnut in cooking, maybe on a stir fry and delicious meal, but unfortunately that's not the species we're talking about tonight. That happens to be a sedge called Eleocharis dulcis, and that produces those nice edible root parts. Trapa natans is a totally different plant family, but its seeds can be used to make a flour. It's not the same fruit that you'd see in other cooking, but it can be used in a culinary way. So here's the water chestnut we're talking about today, Trapa natans. And it's pretty distinctive in having a rosette of leaves that float on the water's surface, and the leaves radiate outwards. So it has a rosette here we'll be talking about. It has nutlets that have four barbs on it, and it can grow in some dense patches. So to dive in deeper, here's a close-up of the leaves. They have triangular to a diamond shape with serrations on the edges, kind of like a knife. And the petioles, which are the stems that attach the leaf to the rosette or larger stem of the plant, have a bladder on it that helps it to float. So they're kind of squishy. And that helps that rosette stay above the water and help the whole rosette to float. There's also stems and roots, of course, of this plant. Even though it has floating leaves, it's still rooted to the ground, so it doesn't float away. And the submerged stem is 12 to 15 feet long with fine roots that anchor it to the soil. Uh, there you go. And so that's the stem roots. And lastly, we have the flowers. There are several small white four-petaled flowers that form near the center of the rosette. So you'll see that kind of tucked in there. And here we go. Lastly, the nutlets. They also form on the rosette and they produce new plants. So just like they have those four-petaled flowers, you have uh, nutlets that have four kind of barbs on it. And they start out as green and fleshy, and then they turn darker as they mature. Now, a little bit about the behavior of this plant. It grows back from seed every year. It's an annual plant. That's actually very important to know for the management of this plant. While perennial plants will grow back from root parts that might stay in the soil, this will reproduce new populations every year from the seed that it produces. It also has those small white flowers that are in the center of the rosette in June. So that's this time of year you might be seeing that. Those flowers give way to those green fruits in July. And one rosette can produce 15 to 20 fruits, so that you can think of that multiplying factor of water chestnut. Those fruits detach from the rosette when they mature, and then float along a current before dropping into the sediment. So it's a little bit more about how its movement and spread within a water body once it's established. And lastly, the fruits can remain viable in the sediment for 12 years. So that can be a long time for finding new populations coming up, even from a water chestnut plant that had been there a long time ago. Now I'll jump into the ecology. So the definition of an invasive species that we like to use from the DEC is a non-native species that causes harm to the environment, economy, or human health. And that's not to say that all non-native species are invasive. There are plenty of non-native species that are beneficial to us, like a lot of our crop species do not originate here. Also, many ornamental plants, we like to enjoy them and they're not a problem or causing some negative impact. But invasive species are different because they're non-native species that cause some negative impact, whether that's the environment, economy, or human health. And water chestnut does check all those boxes, unfortunately. So we'll talk a little bit more about that non-native aspect in its introduction originally to North America. So it's native to Europe, Africa, and parts of Asia. That's a pretty wide region, but not here. And it was in 1877 introduced to North America through the Cambridge Botanical Garden at Harvard University. Then in 1879, just 2 years later, the plant escaped cultivation and was found growing in the Charles River nearby. Then some time passed. It seems about 20 years-ish. That water chestnut was established in the Hudson River, so it made its way to New York. And this seems to kind of be like a big time gap to me, but almost 100 years later, it was first detected on Long Island in Mill Pond, Wantagh. So it took a while to get here, but it is definitely here. And that's one of the places that still has water chestnut. I think that might even be the location that the volunteer effort is at later on. So, how does it spread? Once it's been established, brought to a new region, how does it spread once it's there? Well, as mentioned before, it can spread on the water, it can float on the water, on currents, and move to new locations, especially with connectivity of water bodies. It can also spread from wildlife. The seeds can get stuck on waterfowl. You saw that there were those little barbs on the water chestnut fruit, and that's something that can actually stick into feathers. So the seed hitchhikes on those feathers to get to new locations. Also can spread on watercraft. Seeds can get caught on boat or fishing equipment, especially if it's not properly cleaned. And so that's a way that people may be accidentally introducing them to new locations. I want to put this picture because we've gotten emails sometimes of being like, what are these weird things on the beach? Well, these are those water chestnut nutlets, and sometimes you might see them on the beach. I've seen them on Jones Beach actually. Now, these old nuts are black in color. They might be floating. They're non-viable, meaning they're not able to produce a new plant. And sometimes they watch up on our beaches, I guess, spent out from where the active populations are further inland and get, again, floating, so they're washed up onto shore. Water chestnut cannot survive in salt water. So the good news here is if you're seeing it on the beach, they're not going to be starting new populations. The bad news is I could see this as an argument for harm to human health. You like to walk barefoot on the beach and you don't want to be stepping on these because they're pretty sharp. So unfortunately, we do have some that wash up on our beaches, but it's not going to be producing a new plant at that point. Another impact that it has is, did I skip a slide? Maybe not. Is oxygen depletion. So water chestnut can deplete oxygen in the water. This can be through its living tissue, as it vents the oxygen to the atmosphere and inhibiting light access to the submerged vegetation below it. It could also be using up oxygen through decay. As this plant decays, the process of microbial respiration also uses up a lot of oxygen in the water column. And can be sensitive to oxygen depletion. Fish need oxygen to breathe too. It's dissolved in tiny bubbles in the water. So when there's a lack of that oxygen, it can be a really big problem to aquatic life. That's the slide I was looking for. Dense mats can also impede recreation. If you try paddling through especially dense mats, like even denser than this picture, it's not fun, and you're gonna have a hard time of it. They, yeah. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about water chestnut. Now, does anything eat it? There's little nutritional value of water chestnut to waterfowl and wildlife. Some insects, like the water lily leaf beetle, Gellersae nymphaea, can damage the leaves. So it's a little nibbles, but it doesn't really do much to control the population. Um, Now, there's a relative of that native water lily leaf beetle that's being explored as a possible biocontrol agent, and that beetle is called Gallericella burmanica. It does eat water chestnut in the plant's native range. So in testing, it does prefer water chestnut to other aquatic vegetation. So signs are looking promising for that potentially being a management tool in the future, but there's a lot of testing still that needs to be done to get there. It's a very rigorous process to verify these biocontrol agents that they're going to be safe in the environment, but this could be a tool that we're looking for in the future. So here's the observations of water chestnut from iNaturalist. It's most notable kind of here in central Nassau County in the Mill Pond system, also in the Massapequa Pond system, and a very small population here in Connecticut State Park. You'll notice there's also some populations down here which might concern you, but as mentioned, those are the nutlets that wash up on the shore. So these aren't active populations. I clicked on all the dots actually, and they're people observing the nutlets that they count that as also an observation of the species. So how does this compare to other species? Let's look at the invasion curve here. This graph illustrates the importance of finding and managing new infestations before they spread and become well established, and when that control is still feasible. So over time, an invasive species spread will increase, and as that spread increase, the control costs also increase. So ideally, we want to find and manage new infestations while they're still down here, low, rather than when they're very widespread. The tier ranking list helps us understand more about how these species are prioritized on a regional level. And it's a categorized list of invasive species based on the species impact and distribution. So if it has a high impact and negative impact, we look at its distribution. If emerging invasive species are kind of classified here, that they're in low abundance or maybe not yet present at all, and we're keeping an eye on them. Then, as you get higher and higher distribution for widespread and well established, we're looking at these tier 3 and tier 4 species, ones that we look to contain and keep from getting into priority areas, or ones that we're looking to control on a more local basis and be selective about that control. So, for here, tier 4, these might include species that you're more familiar with, like knotweed, Phragmites, spotted lanternfly, tree of heaven, and also wait, here's the tier linking list if you want to learn more. The QR code's right there. But also, tier 4 is water chestnut. And water chestnut is tier 4 local control in Lisma in New York State. The definition of that is eradication from prism not feasible, focused on localized management over time to contain, exclude, or suppress to protect high priority resources like rare species or recreation assets. Be strategic, deciding where and if to control. And we do have a lot of control projects. Species do actually get re-ranked. We examine that on an annual basis. So if we do a really good job of controlling water chestnut on Long Island, maybe this becomes a lower tier someday. Now, to finish it off, we'll go one slide about strategy. What are some ways that water chestnut can be managed? As mentioned before, this is an annual plant, and that is really a big bonus for us because it's possible to exhaust the seed bank by preventing plants from going to seed over several years. It's not a one and done thing. It's something you need to return back and back to. But if you can control that plant before those seeds emerge, so that's why we do water chestnut pulls right now in June, if you can control those plants and prevent those seeds from going into the seed bank, you can eventually cut it down and exhaust the seed bank and make those populations smaller and smaller and smaller. That can be done from manual removal with volunteers like you and me. I'll be there too. Also, mechanical removal like harvesters, maybe also robots. Carlos is going to talk about that. It could be done potentially someday with biological control with Galaricella burmanica. That could be a big tool to help not only populations suppressed, not eradicate, but suppressed on Long Island, but maybe even all of New York State someday. And one thing that's also helpful that our team does is surveying and rapidly responding to new populations. So we have eyes out there that are looking for water chestnut all over the region and especially in high priority water bodies. So whenever we find it, we can respond quickly. And that's why it's so helpful for you guys being able to recognize this plant because you could help us in that effort too. If you see it in new places, we really want to know. And that's it for me. Water chestnut extravaganza here. So if you have any questions, I think we're taking them at the end, but I'll hand it off now to Carlos.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah. Carlos, if you would like to share your screen.
Of course. So hi everyone. I think I have already been introduced. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And today we're going to talk about, how to smart this pervasive plant. We have had a lot of effort and, we have gone through some adventures trying to get a grasp of how to control water chestnut in Long Island. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So before we start, I have to thank to a lot of people, but there's two people that I want to give a shout out. That's Mark Klotz and Libby Piper. They are our aquatic invasive species stewards for this year, and they are definitely carrying a lot of the work that is being done in the season. So kudos to them. Without them and without our previous stewards and other people who contribute, this would be like an impossible task. Okay, so today, what are we going to talk about today? The first thing is I want to talk to you about what we have done so far and what have we learned from what we have done, right? What is our goal? And based on that, what can we do and what should we do, which are not necessarily the same thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do ecological modeling for management. I'm going to talk to you about the model that we developed and how we are using that model to set realistic expectations for the future. And what's beyond that pretty much that we're going to talk a little bit about and what are our next steps, okay? So this video that you're seeing here is Massapequa Lake. in 2024. Everything that you see, everything that is green on top of the border, all of that is water chestnut. The lake gets completely overrun, right? And it, as Abby mentioned, it impairs several of the ecological services that the lake provides, right? And we are then in a urgency of developing a sustainable strategy for a successful management of water chestnut population. So what have we learned along the way? Well, we have learned that what are the best strategies for different levels to some extent. We already talked about this. We were talking about manual pools, mechanical harvesting or mechanical pooling. Um, Herbicides are always an option, but in highly residential areas, it's even harder to apply. And there are some more out there strategies like applying benthic screens to prevent the plants from spawning and reducing the available area that they have to attach to the ground. Now, we have used several of these strategies across the years. And in Massapequa Lake, I want to tell you a little story that we had in 2018. This is Massapequa Lake in 2018. Everything that is green except the little patch that I'm like marking here. Everything else is water chestnut, basically. So the lake was completely overrun. Actually, it's worse now, or it was last year. But anyway, at this point, it was completely overrun. And what Nassau County did was they brought a mechanical harvester, and this was the result just 1 month later, right? So as you can see, the lake looks clearer, and it worked pretty well. Um, but as you saw in the slide before, last year the lake was overrun again because one thing that happens with invasive species is that they tend to come back, and we have to be able to adapt to the different scenarios that we have. We can have a lot of infestation or very little infestation, and we have to be able to respond to each of those circumstances. Now, the question then is not what can we do? We already know that. The question is actually, what should we do? And that means, what are the best decisions we can make to achieve that goal? Again, our goal is to develop a sustainable strategy for water chestnut population control, emphasis in the sustainable. That means we want to know how many people, hours, how many times we have to go to manual pool or to mechanical harvesting, for how long should we do it? 1 week, 3 weeks, the whole season? Is it cost effective? Whatever we decide to do, is it cost and time effective? Is this the best way to use our limited resources to be able to achieve our goal? So to answer that question, there are many different things that we can do. The approach that we decided to use is using mathematical model to answer that. So bear with me for now. First, let's talk a little bit about a quick primer on ecological modeling, which is the same as talking about mathematical modeling of ecological processes. Now, honestly, and I was going to ask you to participate and, put your hands up or whatever, but for now, just keep it for yourself. Really, 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 okay, really. Did you dread math back when you were in school? Or do you still do it? I would assume that for many people, the answer is yes. I know for sure that for me, I did dread it, and I still do. Now, how can you start approaching a mathematical process when you dread math, right? And how can you bring that closer to the non-math population? Because this is a tool that people should be aware of and that we want people to understand to the best extent of our abilities to communicate it, right? So the answer is simple. Well, I don't know how many of you like old movies, but there's this movie that I adapted this title for. Anyway, the answer to how to do it is just, listen to what the professor Norman Love says, and learn to stop worrying about math and start loving storytelling. Because one thing that ecological modeling has is that it's a beautiful way to tell a story. I'm gonna offer an example here. I want you to follow me on two different instances in which we could use a very simple ecological modeling approach to tell a story. So let's start with two species. Our main character today, water chestnut. Abby has talked to us about that. And let's choose a random, really different plant for now. Let's talk about, I don't know, something that grows really far in a really, completely opposite place. Let's talk about a cactus, specifically as a water. Like, where do they grow? Like in Arizona. That's really far. It's really dry, right? But we can use mathematical modeling or ecological modeling to tell a story that is similar to in both species, because as in all stories, what we have here are characters, and these characters have different attributes. And if we keep track of their attributes and what happens to them throughout the story, we can make predictions of what's going to happen with them. So, for instance, in these two different stories, right? The water chestnut in Long Island and the saguaro in the Arizona desert. Well, we have, for example, the water chestnut grows annually, as we mentioned, and it also grows in patches and it reproduces really fast and it likes to grow aggregated, right? So we know from this that we expect to see water chestnut highly condensed, highly abundant once every year. In contrast, saguaros, these cacti, they grow very slowly, very far apart. I mean, there are not many resources in the desert. And in that case, we know that these two stories have characters that have different traits. They have different characteristics, and we can trace that back. What does this have to do with math? Well, everything, because you can put all of those traits in values that you can go to the field and measure and start answering questions about that. Now, if you're bad at math, as I think I am a little bit, it's okay. Don't worry. There are still other tools that you can use to start approaching this. You can start, for example, by asking a computer to do the math for you to some extent. So you have to be able to talk to a computer, but it's okay. We do that for you. Now, you can bring all of those characters and you can start putting those values in programming languages like Python, or if you don't want to be that fancy, you can use R. Both of them work well. So what we did was take this storytelling. We took a species, we took some measurements about their characteristics, and we asked something for the model. With what in mind? We wanted to know, what do we have to do to prevent the infestation or to control the infestation to the point where we're satisfied with the result, right? So we came up with this model, and now bear with me. There's a little bit of math here, but it's like very simple math. This is what we have. What we have is that we want to know next year and the following years how much water chestnut there's going to be, right? And that depends on the amount of water chestnut we have today in the seed bank, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. And as Abby mentioned, the water chestnut, they produce nuts, and the nuts precipitate, and then they spawn next year. We have agency over that because we can remove the plants before they produce the seeds. So what you see in red here is the amount of plants that we pull every year before we produce the rosette. We can also, to some extent, control the available area in the lake, either by setting these benthic barriers that I talked about before, or we can, for example, introduce native plants that compete for the area with water chestnut, right? So this is where we have agency in the pull effort. And how do we pull, or how do we remove the water chestnut? Well, we have two elements. We have the volunteers manually pulling, which is this part, right? Don't worry about the math. Don't worry about that. I'll get there. And we have the mechanical harvesting. And those things have different behaviors, right? And both of them have different levels of impact, and they're better to be used in different instances. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about benthic barriers, but we can also put benthic barriers in the lake and prevent water chestnut from propagating. Now, the first thing we wanted to know, remember, is how many times should it go? For how long? How many people? Is one thing that happens is when you go to pull and you please join us in our next pool, you will see that people get there all excited. We are all happy, start removing them at 9:30 a.m., 10 a.m. But it's summer, Long Island, beautiful. You get tired and you see that people start like chatting a little bit more, pulling a little bit less, which is normal, right? And we don't want to have people there for 5 or 6 hours when they're basically doing nothing after a given time. So our hypothesis was that people got so tired at some point that their pulling rate, which is what you see in this y-axis, was going to decrease exponentially with time, right? And that's actually what we see. So the rate goes down until we are all tired, and then we all feel defeated because we haven't made a dent in the population. So we wanted to know how long they should be pulling, because we want to use people's volunteers' time that you donate, in the most responsible way. And we wanted to know, what is the actual effect of the mechanical harvesting? So I brought this picture because this is our little harvester here. It's working now, and kudos to Nassau County and Dan Fucci, who has put a lot of effort on having this mechanical harvester working. And as you can see, all of this green area that I'm like signaling with the mouse with the cursor, all of that was water chestnut that was there 2 weeks ago. And this circle is that same area. As you can see, it's more clear. And what you see, like those little points there, don't worry, there are some more pictures. Those little points there are volunteers that were there just yesterday. This picture was taken yesterday. So as you can see, we can actually gauge and assess the effect of the mechanical harvesting, but also the limitations, because the mechanical harvester cannot go everywhere, right? So with this information, we can ask the model like, hey, if I put these values here, let's say I bring 200 people and they remove 60 plants per minute, per hour, and a harvester that works for so many hours, X, Y, Z, what is my expectation? What should I do and when should I see an impact on the actual infestation of the population, of the lake? So I'm going to show you some ugly, really ugly plots. But just bear with me, then I'll show you something that is prettier. In the y-axis, you're going to see the amount of water chestnut, right? So the higher that line goes, the worse for us. And in the x-axis, we're going to see the years. So this is the result of not doing anything. So 0 people pulling, no mechanical harvesting. So basically, the population is going to go high until it reaches the maximum density that it can have, and it's going to stay there, which we are pretty close to that at this point. Now, what if we bring, let's say, 150 people to pull during the year, like for the season? That's the blue line. As you can see, it has a minor impact, but it's basically nothing. And in the end, by year 3 or 5, the population goes again to the maximum abundance, and there's nothing we can do about that with 150 people. So that tells us at least that we don't want to just bring 150 people to control water chestnut in Massapequa Lake, right? So what if we start bringing a mechanical harvester that works for 54 hours a year and 300 people, 350 people? So we see, for example, in blue, we have 350 people and we have a stronger impact in the early years, but in the end the infestation becomes total. So that kind of like tells us that if we're not going to do more than that, we shouldn't even start working, because as Avi mentioned in the tier description of the DEC, an important part is to be strategic about when and how to manage these species. Now, there are a lot of possible futures that we can ask about, and all of these lines are potential futures. And what we want is this region here where the lines go to 0, right? If you see this line here, it's a combination of a lot of potential possibilities. And what we see here is like it goes to 0. But how do I identify those? Well, we ask a line. We set a deadline. We say like, okay, I want to have this ready in 3 years. So what should I do? What is my best strategy to control this in 3 years? Now, we have a lot of information here, so I'm going to summarize it really quickly. This plot that you're going to see, don't be afraid. I will teach you how to read it, and you will see that it's pretty informative. So this is a result of the model, of the mathematical model that we're talking about. In this little x-axis, what you're going to see is the amount of volunteers, so between 0 and 350 volunteers per year, right, during the whole season. What you see in the y-axis is the amount of plants that each person removed at the beginning of the first hour, which is the moment where people remove the fastest, right? And what these columns are the number of hours that the mechanical harvester is operating, right? So if you look at the plot, you're going to see a little squares. Each square is the final value of the lake. And we want squares that are blue. A square that is green means full infestation. A square that is blue means very little infestation or no infestation at all. And as you can see, the more hours we have in mechanical harvesting in 72, for example, the least number of volunteers we need per season, and the slower they can be. So, for example, our most conservative scenario for 72 hours of mechanical harvesting would let us have, for instance, 350 volunteers a year, but pulling at a very, very slow rate. Very slow rate. So this tells us that we can choose demographic and we can decide when to bring in more volunteers, or when bringing more volunteers is going to be a waste of their time and our resources, right? And this is how we talk to the model. This is how the model tells us the story. We gave it the characters, we gave it the traits, and we asked the question, and this is the answer that the model has. And we have been using this model to answer practical questions, and I'm going to talk to you about a successful case that we have this year. Now, beyond the pretty math, we have to come up with a plan, right? Because remember that we had venting screens, maybe, right? We have mechanical pooling and manual pooling, right? And we want to compare these two things. So as a summary, remember that in this model we want to know what is the amount of population, the amount of water chestnut that we're going to have next year, what increases the population, which is basically the amount of water chestnut we have this year, and what reduces the population next year, which is how much plants we remove, how many plants we remove, right? That's our tool. We know what's increasing population, we know how we can bring it down, and we want to know where they balance out, right? And we want to play with those values, right? So the first part is we finally this year start doing mechanical harvesting, and it's been really successful. We are very happy and very grateful with Nassau County, and we are also doing manual pools, which is the volunteer effort that we are asking you to join us, right? Okay, so one thing that we learned last year with the model was that the way we were doing the pools was not working at all, not even for the minor infestations. So we went to the field last year and we took some data. We asked people, we asked volunteers to start removing plants, and we counted how many plants per minute throughout, the different throughout all the hours that we were pulling. They managed, and we tried two methods. This is the traditional method. So what you see here is the number of hours, the first hour, second and third hour, and how many plants per minute they were removing, right? Then we said okay, this method doesn't work. Let's try a different method. Let's try something that we call the squad method. And when we use the squad method, the amount of plants removed per person per minute increased basically tenfold. So we went from 60 to 600, somewhere around those lines, right? We still saw that people were getting tired. So we still needed to know for how long are we going to ask our volunteers to go to the field, stay in the sun, and keep pulling. So we use the model to put in this data and ask it about how long should we have the people there. And we calculated how deep that curvature is, and we realized that after 3.5 hours, it makes no sense to ask our volunteers to stay any longer. After 3.5 hours, people should get rest, relax, and go home. So that's something really important that we learned from that lesson. Not only that, we actually some really cool results. What I'm showing you right now is an infestation in Massapequa Creek. It's an infestation in Massapequa Creek. And this is the creek after we did the squad method. And this year, this is what we have. So you see some plants growing here, but curiously enough, those are not water chestnut. Those are completely different species that was not there the year before. We may have opened the window for a different ecological process, a different species to come in and make the story a little bit more interesting. But we're still assessing what's happening there. Now, we also learned that both mechanical harvesting and manual pooling have some limitations in terms of space and time, and definitely money. So one thing that we did to address the gaps that we had between those two methodologies was, well, we decided to try to come up with a strategy ourselves, which is where the robots come from. Well, robots is a strong word. So we created we are working on creating our own mechanical harvester. We got funded by the Northeast APMS Foundation. And our goal with this method is, with this device, is to produce a small, low, really, really low cost and fully automated mechanical harvester. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Once this device is ready, it will be able to self-navigate. It will be able to harvest, of course, that's its purpose, and it will be able to provide geospatial reports, meaning we will know where it harvests, how many plants were there, and it's, again, fully automated. So how does it operate? And this is really important because it's not rocket science, and you're going to see that actually everyone, you in the public, you can have access to this, you can help us developing, and you can help us learning more about this process. So there are two types of movements that this thing is going to do. The first one is called ballistic. So it knows where it sees a plant, it knows where the plant is, so it goes in a straight line. But since we don't have perfect information about it, maybe you don't know where the plant is, right? So we let it go diffusively. So it just randomly walks until it finds something that tells it that maybe the plant is there. And this part takes a little bit more time. So that is important because when you have a big mechanical harvester, you still spend time trying to gauge where the small remnants of the harvest or of the of the plants are. So this is just to show you a little bit of a video. I'm about to finish, don't worry. Do you see this red point? Please look at this red point here. This red point is the harvester. This is a simulation, and everything that is green is water chestnut, but the harvester has no idea where it is. And this happens in real life. You're missing 2, 3, 5 plants. That's a small patch. You have a big boat and a big lake. So it's easy to miss. So what you see is it's going to spend a lot of time just searching around without actually knowing until it finds some and it starts removing it. But that means that having a big mechanical harvester is not the best strategy when the density is low. And if the depth of the lake is too high, then having volunteers is also not a good strategy. So this small automated mechanical harvester is meant to answer to that necessity, right? It also provides other opportunities. We will be able to, well, since it's able to self-navigate and to provide geospatial reports, well, we can actually use it to automate vegetation, sort like to for us to know where other invasives can be. So we can put this in a lake and ask it like, hey, go and find these 10 different invasive species and tell me where they are. So when you come back, I will know where I have to go. It's not only the harvester, it's able to go and collect information for us. And it's definitely not meant to replace the effort that we put, it's meant to supplement it. Now, what I mentioned a moment ago about this being an opportunity for everyone to, to chime in is because we want you to get involved with this. And you're probably not, it's going to take us some time, but you're going to see us in lakes working with this thing. And everyone can approach. And we would love everyone to, don't be shy and ask about it because this is something easy to use. We want you to at least approach it, touch it, see where the effort is going to. And I wrote this little video that we took yesterday. These are volunteers from West Babylon High School. And you're going to see, well, this is Juju and this is Anya, and they are about to launch the navigation system. We were testing it yesterday for the first time. And what Juju is doing is just explaining how it works. And she knows how it works. And they are able to handle it. You see, they're grabbing it without any concern. Like, it's a very resistant equipment, and they did it by themselves. They put in the boat, they activated, and they went and they collected the data. This means the citizens collected the data. They were there and they collected data for us that we're going to use to make better decisions in the future. So that's where we are going to. That's what we are aiming for, and that's the whole purpose of this automation process. Now, once our prototype is ready, again, we have potential applications like, well, the mechanical harvesting of water chestnut and maybe even other species. We want to survey water chestnut, Ludwigia, that is a pervasive invader in the Peconic system in Suffolk County. We have this growing concern about a species called parrot feather, beautiful species, South American species. But again, it's becoming a huge deal. And maybe survey, not harvester, Phragmites, right? We have several challenges, right? We need to keep it low at a low cost. It has to be scalable. A single small automated chestnut is not mechanical harvester, sorry, is not going to have any impact. Our purpose is to be able to create small fleets, right? That are easy to repair, easy to operate, cheap to produce, and that don't require like a huge infrastructure for that. We also need to train these models because if it's fully automated, we're going to use machine learning and AI to actually teach the computer where to look for the plants and how to identify, how to know that it's water chestnut and not spatterdock, which is a native plant, right? And also, we would like to adapt it to non-Long Island conditions, right? Like, for example, we have a huge problem in the Hudson Basin with water chestnut and, other places like Lake Champlain, right? So all of this should converge in answering the questions about the model, like, going through all of these processes in which the community is going to be involved because we need the community involved. There's no way for us to do this by ourselves. And that's our way to bring the community in, to show you what are the tools that we are developing and what are the results that we're seeing. Because even modest results, even where our results are modest, we are seeing them and we are progressing and we are going to keep progressing, but we need your assistance, both in just supporting the programs, but also on joining us in the manual pools because we have a lot of plans to pull. Okay, now the prototype again, as I mentioned, is meant to subsidize part of the things that we still don't know how to do or that we still have problems with doing. But that's not the only thing, because as I mentioned, we need volunteers. We need people invested, like local businesses, to promote um, the activities that we do. We definitely absolutely rely on on the support of the DEC, aquatic invasive species team, and also other agencies like LISMA, like Nassau County Soil and Conservation District. And we also count with, less obvious volunteers. For example, the West Valley High School, which I want to give a shout out. This is the second year they work with us and has been great. These are students that are just about to graduate from high school, and maybe they will find some inspiration in the things that we do, and they're definitely going to their communities and giving back to the communities that support them. And of course, we want you, right, to help us to remove our chestnut. So, having said that, we are going to have different pools in June and definitely in July before the seeds mature and drop. So, we would definitely like to count with you. Uh, Give it a thought. Consider joining us. It's also really really fun. We will provide waders and kayaks for some people. You will be able to see parts of the prototype, and hopefully by the end of the season, you will be able to see the functioning prototype, which is going to be, in my opinion, really cool. Um, so yeah, it's a nice way to spend time meeting a lot of new people and have an impact on your community. Having said that, well, I again have to thank to a lot of people for this, but I it's a lot of names. So I want to thank to the DEC, to APMS, and to the Theoretical Ecology Lab in the Department of Ecology and Evolution, and of course everyone who has been involved directly or indirectly with this project. And with not further ado, we'll take any questions if there are none. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. That was really exciting. That was a lot. You're busy. Um, right now we have one question in the question and answer. Uh, and it's, are these small mechanical harvesters going to be implemented across the state?
Good question. First one, I think the first one is, are we going to implement them in Long Island? Because again, this is something that we are inventing, right? So there are a lot of challenges along the way. We're very optimistic. We have done a lot of progress. And once we have successfully implemented it in Long Island, which is basically still water, because that's one of the special conditions of Long Island is that our water systems are either lakes or very slow moving rivers, right? So that makes the whole process easier. Now, do we want to see them in other places? 100%. I cannot spoil that much, but we have been talking to other agencies from other places, and there's definitely interest in that. However, first of all, well, our first commitment is to Long Island, and we first want to deliver in Long Island, and after that, we'll see how we can reach out to other regions. Thank you for your question.
Um, I have just sort of a follow-up. So it seems, let me make sure I'm understanding correctly. So you would be using this in addition to volunteers, but would this be, um, and this would be to replace like the giant mechanical harvesters that are like really expensive and big, right? Am I correct? Or is it
Not
sort of in addition
necessarily.
to?
It's in
Okay.
addition to. So everything.
Okay.
So we have to combine every single strategy that we can get our hands on.
Excellent.
But every strategy is a kind of tool, right? So you don't use a hammer to screw a cork or whatever it is. So
Right.
we are just developing tools that are more that respond better to our necessities. So
Excellent.
we are not looking forward to replace anyone or any other strategy. Just
Okay.
complement. Yeah,
Compliment. Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's so much smaller. It looked so much smaller than those other harvesters as well.
that's correct.
So
Really
much
small.
more manageable for tighter places as well, I'm sure.
That is correct.
Um, how long did it take for that larger mechanical harvester in like Massapequa? Like how many days did it have to run to be able to clear?
So this season, it's been there for 6 days, between 3 to 5 hours a day,
Okay.
but it varies. And also, it's not always collecting, because once it gets full, and with a monocrop that big, it gets full really quickly. It has to go
Mhm.
back to shore, it has to be unloaded, and then it has to go back again, right?
Okay.
So it's not like it's all the time working, and the rate of pulling varies. And we are still measuring that to put that in the model, and have more accurate predictions of, what is the actual effort.
Mhm.
I see that Valerie has a question. Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
So
Was
Valerie is, oh my God, it disappeared. There you go. I have it. So Valerie is asking, I cannot read it. It's,
how should folks prepare for the volunteer event? Should we bring waiters if we have them?
do you want to jump in, Abby?
Well, I think you mentioned you might have some waiters, but I'm sure that if you have your own waiters, that probably fits the bill. You should bring those. What else do you need? Bring water. I like, if you ever have those little hydration bags that like, but that has a little like tube, I wear that, and then I have my water with me the whole time. But you could also always go back to shore to take a break. Um, what else? What else do you recommend?
Sunscreen, a hat,
Yeah, those things. Sunscreen hat. Absolutely.
especially
Keep ready
around
for the
11,
elements.
close to noon, it gets tough.
Yeah.
And a lot of energy. That's all I need.
Now, Abby, you said something about the shore. What is that? Um,
Oh, well, just depending on the where we are, sometimes you might be a little bit further out in the pond. But if
okay.
you prefer to stay close to the pond, I'm sure there's stuff to the shoreline. There's more you could do. But usually there's kind of like a launch point that we'd all start from, and then Carlos would direct us on where he wants us to go.
Excellent. How difficult is it? What is it like when you pull manually?
It's a little bit of a messy work sometimes. Do you recommend wearing gloves? I always have gloves, so if you have some kind of gloves, that's helpful because, as we mentioned, those could be those sharp barbs. It can be a little messy, a little bit smelly sometimes, but that's all part of the fun. Um, and uh, yeah, you definitely do get tired after a little while, as Carlos accurately predicted, but I think it's still the people around you make it fun. And I don't know, I always have a good time.
I will say, you're gonna get your leg day and your, arm day done. Like, so you can skip gym that day.
That's a
It's
good
like,
point.
yeah,
Okay. It sounds like a real team bonding experience.
It is.
it is. It actually is. Yeah.
All right. Um, does we have another question. Oh, another question in the chat. So if the larger mechanical pullers fill up with water chestnuts and have to be emptied every once in a while, how will this work with the smaller automated removal machines?
Exactly the same way. Now, the difference is we expect to, like, once we have a prototype that it's easy to replicate. Think about this as a leaf cutting ant, right? So one leaf cutting ant is not going to do much, but when you see them working in tandem in a small fleet, then you're going to start seeing like a larger process. So the our expectation is that the effect is going to be additive. And by the way, that is the only part that we have not automated in the design. We still need a human to remove, to basically to empty the harvester, so the harvester can go back again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Will there be any weekend dates added to the poll schedule?
Yes, we will update the schedule for July, which right now it's like fairly open. We will update the schedule for July, and some of those days are going to be in the weekend. We regularly try to do the polls during the week because, well, attendance is higher. Um, is that like attendance is higher, and it's easier to bring groups of different organizations during a weekday. But we are definitely like more than open. Actually, we have one weekend pool in Mill Pond. I think it's the second week of July, but I'm blanking on the date. So where can you see it? In the registration link, you have all the list of dates. So you're gonna see that list like start increasing in length as soon as we know, where we have more. But if you would like to kind of like host or start like organizing or helping us organizing one of these pools, just reach out to me. My email and phone number is in the link. So you can just reach out and we'll see it happen.
Beautiful. I'm just going to put um, the registration link again in the chat, and I think those are all of our questions, unless anyone else has any other comments. Okay, so I want to thank our presenters, our collaborators, and our attendees for being here. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be posted to CTUC's website shortly. For anyone interested in joining a water chestnut poll, like I said, I already put that link in the chat, and then the CSLI specific sponsored poll will be Friday, June 27th at 9:30 a.m. in Mill Pond in Wantagh. But again, there are several other times, as we just mentioned, if you'd like to go at a different time. Lastly, watch your inbox to see our follow-up email with resources, and don't forget to check out our future webinars on emerging invasives and the Coastal BioBlitz. So have a good night, everyone, and happy Invasive Species Awareness Week.